Hi everyone, my name is Arthur. At 18 years old, I make very good money, all because I get paid to be my own parent's child. Haven't you heard any stories like that? Well, if I'm the first, then give me a plus sign and write your opinion about it in the comments below the video. In the meantime, I'll get started. As you may have guessed, my ancestors are very wealthy people, but we didn't used to be. Although we were never poor, still money fell from the sky on us. As they say, I know, yes, it doesn't happen according to you, but one word will explain it all to you. Inheritance. My grandfather, my biological father's father, was a big businessman. He built an empire, and my father ran his business. But he wasn't a very good son. First, he left my mother and me. Then he got into casinos, computer games, then drugs and alcohol. And then he got put back into rehab. And from there, he escaped. His lover, who was also a drug addict, helped him out. My grandfather looked for him, and even with his connections and positions, he couldn't find him. My mother married my stepfather, a good, kind man, but no fish or meat. My mum worked alone at first. Then she started kicking my stepdad, and he started moving. After a couple of years of marriage, he finally got a job fixing appliances. He got good money, and his partner helped him, and it got easier to live on. My grandfather always helped us financially. Apparently, a sense of shame in front of us for his own son was at play. But my mother did not care, as long as the money was enough to fully support me, as well as to pay the mortgage. Gradually I grew up, and my grandfather got older. He tried to get me into their business, but I was still too young. Grandpa wanted me to carry on his business, and then get my mother involved because he didn't have any more heirs or relatives to help him. But he had a lot of enemies waiting for him to die, and then that day came. 2 years ago, his maid called us at home with sad news. Of course, I was the most upset. We went to the funeral and were the only visitors there. Grandpa's lawyer organised the whole event. Right after the funeral, the lawyer came up to us, right in the cemetery. Mrs. Daly, Mr. Arthur, your late relative left a message for you. You need to come with me to his house so that I can make it official. What's the message? I'll tell you all about it when I get there. As agreed, we went to Grandpa's house. I've been there a lot, but my mother hasn't. Ever since my dad left, she and Grandpa have only talked at our house or on the phone. Wow, that's quite a house. Is that how he lived? Why were there so few people at the funeral? Dan, be modest, so there must have been a reason. I'm sorry. My grandfather was great. I wish I had been there when he died. Son, you loved him very much as he loved you. Don't blame yourself for it. You did a lot for him. Gave him happiness. That's the main thing. I do not know. Why did Dad not come? I'm sure he knows. That's not for me to ask. We went into Grandpa's office. I'd never been there before. On the wall hung a huge portrait of me as a little boy and Grandpa. I don't even remember myself at that age, but that picture made me want to cry even more. The lawyer waited until we were seated on the leather couch, and then read my grandfather's address to my mother. It said that my mother would be able to carry on his business, and for the first 6 months, she would be closely assisted by a team of specialists. He had signed a contract with them. In case of violation of at least one clause, his lawyer will immediately deal with the problem. Mum was greatly surprised, but delighted. After all, it was a good business, a profitable business. And then a loud but came up. It would only be if her son, i.e. me, would move in with them and only on his own violation, until I turned 21 years old. Then the whole case goes to me, and I also have a team of specialists working with me to teach me from scratch. Also, the deceased bequeathed his entire inheritance, including movable and immovable property, to his deeply beloved grandson, Arthur. Today, he will be able to receive 10% of his entire fortune, and after school, college, and business training, the other 90%. However, his 10% will be managed by his mother, since his grandson is a minor. That should be enough money for a secure life and college education. And the mansion where we are now, they can use it from now on. I mean, live in it or sell it, it's up to them. There was silence in the office after the lawyer had read out everything, and only my stepfather said, "Wow." Mum pushed him with her elbow and looked at me. I sat there in shock, as did she. It wasn't until we got home that we just screamed, "Ah!" Mum immediately started packing up so we could go to move into the mansion. Within a month, we had sold unnecessary stuff, brought cars for all three of us, and a new life began. I was truly grateful for my grandfather for such a generous gift, because now I could not worry about my future. All that was required of me was to study well, and I dedicated myself to that. I was motivated for the other 90%. What more was needed, right? Money was there. Everything was there. We didn't deny ourselves anything. My mum worked, even got my stepdad there. Of course, the money wasn't like my grandfather's, but it was pretty good. Business is not a stable thing. So we lived for about 6 months in a kind of euphoria. And then, when my mother began to work, she became more aggressive, tired. My stepfather was a specialist in some departments there. He couldn't do much more with his brain. They began to have a falling out over this or that, and then one day I heard them arguing. What? So you live for free in a free house? You drive a nice car, you have a job, and you are not happy about something? That's what I'm dissatisfied about. Of course you're the head of the company. You decide everything there. But what am I? Some specialist? Everyone is staring at me. And what can I do about it? Say thank you for the fact that you have it all to me, thanks to me and my son? Are you saying that I'm nothing without you? You didn't even make the interview for the head of department. You only got hired as an employee because of my interim status. Oh yeah? Well, thank you, honey. Since I'm already so stupid and talentless, why don't we get a divorce? You'll be the most perfect career woman, divorced and with a baby. You want a divorce? So you're talking? Yes, come on, leave me. I came out to them in the middle of the argument and calmly asked them to calm down and reminded them that we violate even one point, that's it. The will is annulled. Also, I was terribly tired of listening to them fight every day. The house is big, but you can hear them just fine. Their reaction, I was surprised, but they both started yelling at me, calling me cynical. Mum generally said that I was crazy and she did not need anything. I was so angry that I said, okay, tomorrow I'll call a lawyer. Mum, pack your things, we're moving out. And they instantly sobered up. Mum and stepdad started apologising, so that they would do whatever I wanted, just so I wouldn't do anything stupid. And then my mother offered me a salary as a kind of compensation for what they had said. And from then on, I got paid every month an amount that was triple to what I was getting in my allowance. And I loved it like hell. I was luxuriating. I brought whatever I wanted, and not just for myself. I started hanging out. I had a circle of adoring people, of course, who I fed and drove at my expense. My life changed a lot, and I slipped down in my studies. And whenever my mum tried to get me to do my homework, I threatened to disinherit myself and her, and it worked. We lived like that for the last 3 years. I somehow graduated from high school and college, and then I had to get an education from my grandfather's specialists. It would take another year. I didn't want to study. I got used to the old regime. I slept in lectures, where I was the only student. I often skipped classes. Everything was on my record. My mum was really worried, and my stepdad even more so. I was the only one who didn't seem to care. I flunked the first module of the exam. The lawyer reminded me about the will. I was a little worried, but more about the other thing. My father came to our house, you see. He looked good, said he was done with the past, and was ready to get back to work. He and my mum had a terrible fight, but he said that his lawyers would take 80% of our property because he was the direct heir. My mum got a little neurotic, and I was a little nervous too. And then I talked to him and asked him what he wanted from us. Come back to me, son. I'll be a good father, I promise. But how am I going to leave my mum? You either come back to me or I'll take everything away from you. But you can't do that. I'm your father, not your neighbour. Think about it. You either get everything or you get nothing. That meeting affected me. I started studying more. I stopped skipping classes and I passed all my exams with flying colours. 6 months later, I had a final exam. And yes, I passed it with flying colours. Everything was supposed to go to me that day. And as I was signing the papers, my father came in. He said that if I didn't formally disclaim my mother now, he would take everything. Mum started crying, begging him, and he didn't even move. Son, this is your future. I will not take offence at you. You must get this inheritance for yourself. We'll live, don't worry. Dad was smiling contentedly. I kissed my mum and walked over to my dad, looked at him for a long time, and then slammed my fist right into his face. I don't care about the money. You don't deserve to be my dad. I took my mother's hand and we went home. In the evening, the lawyer came to see us, and we had already packed everything. Should we go? Sit down, it's not that simple. It turns out that your ex-husband is still a drug addict. When Arthur hit him, you left and a bag fell out of his pocket. We didn't think to look into it, but it all came out on its own. He wouldn't have got anything because I had a second letter from the deceased. which said that the inheritance should not go to any more living souls. But I had no right to tell him about it until today, according to the contract. So, congratulations. You are the full owners of the entire fortune. And at that moment, I vaguely remember what happened, because I passed out from joy. Anyway, it ended well. Would you like that?
Hi, my name is Martin. I want to tell you something about myself, or rather, about my parents. So to speak, share with you. I think you'll be as shocked as I am, and it'll be fully justified. Tell me, do you have parents? And what are they? How do they treat you? I know that all of them may not be perfect. Perhaps you often quarrel with them, argue, and sometimes you really want to get out of the house, right? Here, I also have this happen here. Well, it was more accurate. While they're not going to sell me, you know how it is. Like things or products. Here, you are tired of a thing, or it's outdated, and you decide to get rid of it in a way that's profitable for you. They decided to do the same thing with me. Unpleasant? Oh, and how unpleasant it was when I found out about it. If you want to know all the details, then listen further. By the way, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Put a like and be sure to write your opinion in the comments. To begin with, I'm the oldest child in the family. There's two other children, my twin brothers, John and Jack. Well, so you can roughly understand how the family treats them and me. If there's something delicious left in the house, then it's given to the twins, and it doesn't matter whether they want it or not. When we go to the store, first to buy all the youngest, and to me, most, is I always tried to look after them, help them with their homework, pick up from school, kindergarten, mug. Sometimes my mother made me cook special breakfasts, where you need to show maximum culinary skills. Yes, it was very unpleasant for me, and parents always have one argument for everything. They are younger than you. Of course, the question, so what, was always forced on me. But I got a couple of slaps on the back of the head for it and haven't asked since. It didn't seem to complain much. I even thought it was all right to live like this. Until I grew up. Well, then I started to see how life works in other families. I made friends where I saw how all children are treated equally, and it touched me. I never complained to anyone, and, of course, did not reprimand my ancestors. I didn't want to be any extra problems. And over the years, the resentment grew. And then something even more unpleasant happened. I'll tell you what. This happened a few years ago. The whole family went to a camping trip. Mom bustled around the kitchen all morning making beautiful sandwiches for us. As always, I dragged heavy bags and packed everything in the car. I took a few boxes at a time, and they blocked my path. I honestly didn't see that John ran right out to meet me. In short, I crashed into him and all the boxes fell on him. They weren't exactly heavy, but he got hit on the head and lost consciousness. Can you imagine how hysterical my mother was? We immediately went to the hospital, where John was quickly revived. He was okay, just bumped his head a little. I think my mother was even worse off that day than he was. When I got home, I got a beating. I got the full amount, was accused of all the deadly sins, and it seemed that my mother was ready to just slap me, but restrained herself with the last of her strength. Everything I said sounded like a pathetic excuse, so I chose to remain silent. From that day on, my mother didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Whenever I didn't try to make up, she ignored me. 2 days later, some people came to our house. I saw them talking to my mother about something. My mother was given an envelope. She signed somewhere and called me. She introduced me to these people, Mr. and Miss Jones. These are your new parents, she said. What? What do you mean? I expected a lot, that I would be deprived of money, internet, TV, dates with friends. Not that I'd be sold. At this moment, all the childish resentments, misunderstandings, and anger woke up in me. I felt so broken, so unnecessary, and it was terrible. I couldn't believe my mom would just sell me out like that. All she said to me at parting was that they were good people and that they were rich. I packed my things, still in a state of shock, and left the house. No one even said goodbye to me. I got in the car and we drove. I was silent all the way, even though these people tried to talk to me. They were very nice, tried to please me in every possible way, offered to stop by some stores to buy anything, but I didn't even know what to do now. How is this possible? When we got home, they showed me my room. I didn't leave it for 3 days. I didn't want to eat or drink. My new parents were worried. They tried to feed me, lured me with goodies, but I refused flatly. I needed time to digest the events. I was shattered, and then I decided to take some pills. It occurred to me that if my parents didn't need me, then who did? I found something in the medicine cabinet and drank, lay down on the bed, and felt how bad I was getting. The new mother came running into the room just as I was about to pass out. I woke up in the hospital, and they were giving me IVs. My new parents were sitting next to me, crying. Surprisingly, they were crying for a child they barely knew. Why? When I came to, my parents, they were very happy. They kissed me, hugged me, and scolded me for what I had done. My mother wiped away her tears, told me never to do it again. It was nice. For the first time in my life, I felt that someone needed me. In the end is when I started feeling better. When I got back to their house, I noticed that they had a really nice house and that they were so nice to me. My new dad showed me all the rooms, allowed me to go to his office sometimes, and my mom took me to the shops and dressed me up. Yes, I felt a little different in attitude love, awe, and warmth. It was strange to feel comfort from strangers more than from one's own parents. My mother would read me interesting books at night, my father would meet me after school, and every day we would build me a new bike from scratch. It was so cool to do something for yourself with your own hands. So about 6 months passed, and one day, my old parents came to our house. That mother was crying and asked me to come back. She said she made a mistake and regretted it. Come back to our house, son. We miss you, she said. The new mother got up from her chair and indignantly told them to leave the house. My old mother took an envelope of money out of her pocket and threw it on the table, saying that they'd changed their minds. We don't need money, she said. Ah, is that so? All your life you've been abusing him, hating him, humiliating him in every possible way, selling him to us for a measly $10,000, and now you have decided to take him away, allegedly out of good feelings? Do you think I don't know that my son is being offered $500,000 to someone who will lead him to an old man Francis? My mother shouted. I sat there and didn't understand what was happening. Old mom wiped her eyes and started talking to me, like she misses me so much and loves me. I asked the new mother who Francis was. Then my mother told me that in fact, when I was born, I had real parents and they were my new parents. It so happened that my grandfather, Francis, being a very influential man, told his son to give his first child to him to raise. He planned to take the child and to take it to another country to raise as their heir to the empire. But my parents loved me very much, so they didn't want to give me up. They left me with a babysitter named Selena to hide me for a while, and when my parents came back for me, I was gone. Selena said that I was stolen from her, but in fact, she sold me to people who couldn't have children of their own. I grew up in a new family, but when I was 9 years old, my parents had their own children, and I fell by the wayside, and then I became a burden. We've been looking for you all these years, but we had to do it quietly, without making any noise, so that your grandfather wouldn't take you away from us, and he seems to have found out about you, and is now offering $500,000 to catch you, the father said. My old parents pretended they had nothing to do with it. There was silence in the air. I still didn't really understand what was going on, but my real mom sat down next to me and hugged me. She said there was no way in the world she was going to give me up to anyone now. The guests got up and left, with the psycho taking their money again, and were now deciding what to do and how to hide from the annoying grandfather. This is my story, friends. So now I'm even glad that I was sold, because I got my own parents, and also became rich.